Hello, Black Swamp podcast listeners. This is episode number 4 of our new podcast series. Thanks again for tuning in, and as always, be sure to tell your friends, colleagues, students, neighbors, or whoever might be interested in listening. Feel free to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and hit us up with a nice rating, whether you like what you're hearing or not. Special note, we just launched our latest sound solution project, which is a 2-week online event running from August 19th through the 30th. We're featuring special educational and performance videos from Black Swamp artists and educators, new content from BSP headquarters, and of course, a special product promotion through our friends at Steve Weiss Music. All this just in time for all your back-to-school purchases, kids. Visit us at www.blackswamp.com/sound-solution-project. I know it's a long one. I think we'll put that URL in the show notes for you. Today we're talking with BSP Educator Andrea Venet. Andrea is Assistant Professor of Percussion at the University of North Florida. Performs in the Escape 10 duo with her friend and fellow percussionist Annie Stevens. You can find them at escape10.com, and travels regularly around the country performing and presenting masterclasses. We talk about Andrea's transition from violin to percussion, her drum corps years during and after high school, I think. Of course, the Escape 10 duo, some composing she's doing, and her lovable bulldog Shasti, plus some other fun stuff. So here we go. Well, thanks for calling in, Andrea. And
no problem.
If you hear some, for listeners, if you hear some large crashing and banging in the background, that's your dog Shasti.
Yeah.
She? Sorry, it's a she. She's okay though. She's just getting water.
She was getting some water. It's hot here in Florida, so
okay, right. You got to stay hydrated from all that running around that she does. I'm sure. Like the bulldogs are pretty active animals, aren't they?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, not at all.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in, and if you have 45 minutes or an hour or so, we'll talk through a bunch of stuff, and whatever you're interested in, and we have some other topics that we've pre-discussed, sort of. So, so you're in Florida right now, and is that where you grew up or went to school?
I'm actually from Arizona. I was born in Tucson, and then in high school moved up to the Phoenix area, and so I did my undergrad at Arizona State.
Sure.
And then after that, I kind of left and did my master's at Rutgers, and then doctorate at Eastman, and I've lived a bunch of places. So it's actually been a while since I've lived in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's where I'm from.
So, have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I have been to the Grand Canyon, but it's funny because I didn't actually visit it until I wasn't living in Arizona anymore. With Annie Stevens, we did like an Escape 10 tour. Right. And like our first road trip, and that's actually, we made the Grand Canyon one of our stops. And that was the first time I saw it. I'm ashamed to say that.
No, I went for the first time. I mean, I'm not from Arizona, but I went for the first time last year with my family, and it's amazing. Like, it's the coolest thing. I wasn't expecting. I mean, sure, it's going to be grand, but to kind of drive around the corner and you look out and all of a sudden there's this enormous hole in the earth. It's pretty wild. So yeah,
I would love to go back and visit where we have more time to see it, not visit during the hottest part of the year either. It gets pretty warm in Arizona.
So you just stopped there on a performance tour, or did you perform?
We didn't. Well, so the way that my duel started is we did this big road trip on I-10 in a Ford Escape from coast to coast. And so on the way back, we had performances on the way, and we played in California. And then on the way back, we just stopped at the Hoover Dam and in Vegas and in the Grand Canyon for fun. So no Grand Canyon concerts yet.
Cool. So you're in Arizona. Well, you're not now, but you were when you were younger. and you were kind of interested in music at an early age, like most percussionists, I guess, like grade school, high school, you did that whole thing?
Yeah, I started out as a violin player. That's where my first roots are. So in fourth grade, I joined the orchestra, started playing violin, and then I started piano a couple years after that. And I actually didn't start playing percussion until I was a freshman in high school, where I got recruited to be in the marching band to play xylophone because I could play piano.
Right.
And so that's when I kind of, the switch to the dark side sort of took over there in high school. So I did both through my first year of college.
You did?
And then
You did both, like orchestra and band, all the way into college?
Yeah. I wasn't a violin major, but I played in orchestra and, but, I was a percussion major, and being a musician and a music major is a busy thing with a lot of commitment. So I just didn't have time to keep doing both. So,
when was the last time you picked up a violin then? Not just to move it out of the way of a marimba or something.
I got it out actually probably like a month ago. I pulled it out of the closet and was jamming out a little bit. I actually, I missed it a lot. I acquired a banjo a few years ago, just kind of on a whim, like on the fly eBay purchase, and because I was guess missing playing a stringed instrument, and that was kind of a cool way, I think, to kind of fill that void a little bit with something new.
That's cool.
I
have two daughters. The oldest is 11, and she just started playing violin this year. So
cool.
I don't know. I try to tell her stories like this sometimes of cool people that played violin or interesting things, outside of whatever pieces they're playing. It's just to try to keep her interested and motivated in it. But she seems to enjoy it, and yeah, it's cool. We've gone to a couple concerts, and I'm much more impressed than I thought I would be for a sixth grade orchestra. I guess they didn't seem like a bunch of cats kind of getting hit by a bus or anything. So it was.
Well, you can tell your daughter it's really good for her ear.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to use your ear to play in tune. I think, as percussionists, we're playing fixed pitched instruments. So I think, when I switched over to percussion, that was something that was beneficial to me. Is you already been using your ear in a meaningful way. Yeah. Hopefully, if you're playing a tune. So I think that's really helpful, and
I think that's something I missed. When I was younger, my sister took piano lessons, and my parents didn't really ask or force me to. And I can definitely see where, getting into high school and, when back in my day, we pretty much played snare drum, and then people, then a couple people played some bell or mallet parts, and we weren't, other than learning a few scales, I wasn't really I didn't pursue it until I got into college. And so I do. In hindsight, I can't go back, obviously, but I think having a foundation, either piano or, like you're saying, another stringed instrument or something more pitch related would have been really beneficial. So keep that in mind, kids. Okay, so you're in high school, you're playing, and then you decide to go to, music school, and drum corps in there also? After a couple of years, this is something you want to do and pursue. What's the transition like there?
Well, let's see. I'd wanted, drum corps became on my radar in my last year of high school, I think. And I really wanted to march, and my parents wouldn't let me when I was in high school. So I think my first summer was in 2002 with Santa Clara. And I believe that was after my first year of college, I think. Yeah, I think so. Math is hard. That was a long time ago. But yeah, I finally, auditioned and, taught marching band to pay for my tour fees and my flights and stuff like that. And I just, I remember seeing Vanguard from the sidelines at an Arizona show. I think it was in 2001. And I was like, that's really cool. I want to do that. The pit was awesome. Right. And so, I went and auditioned, and I was really fortunate because like Jim Ancona was teaching there, and Jim Casella and Murray Gussick, and Ralph was there. So it was like a really amazing experience, really talented, wonderful musicians running the percussion section, and really great people. So it was like a really great educational opportunity, and I think so that was cool because I'd always done marching band and had really great teachers doing marching band, and that's basically where I learned how to play percussion. I didn't take private lessons, and I didn't do summer festivals. I'm just a product of the public school system, and we had a competitive marching band and drumline program, and so that was really cool to do that at that level with those teachers. And I feel like too is cool because like everything we were learning in the pit transferred inside. We used the method of movement, developed by Lee Howard Stevens, and so Jim was a really good marimba player, and so my hands benefited from that, and we were using good concert techniques on everything, and so
I think
it was cool.
Yeah, it's two interesting things like that. You can go from playing violin and kind of getting recruited into your high school marching band to a couple years later, like seeing like this is something you want to do and be a part of, and kind of grow that much in that small amount of time, and ultimately build a career out of it. I think is really cool. And then like crossing over, I think, kind of having that drum corps and marching experience and kind of knowing that it does transfer over, because I think there is a little bit, again, at least when I was younger, a sort of a stigma or a divide between the two, and maybe it's more of a kind of a drumline, a classical divide, but so you didn't. It sounds like because of the instruction you were getting, it wasn't a difficult kind of transition, or you didn't have to relearn techniques or relearn how to approach instruments. It was pretty seamless then?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do have to give huge props to my high school teachers, like Liz Beiersdorfer and Steve Ridley. Casey Farina were like my front ensemble instructors, and they were amazing teachers and mentors, and they all were really like big marimba geeks. Right. So I had a really good foundation in that sort of setting, and then it was a really smooth transition to do Vanguard because that's kind of how Jim developed everything, and so like that was just, it's just kind of playing with your outdoor voice, I guess, with fundamentally concert principles, and through those experiences too, through those teachers in both situations, I was exposed to really good chamber music. We always did INU was like a big deal. It's a little bit different now. I think it's not like that was a big deal during finals week that we always worked towards during the summer at Vanguard, and we were excited to play music outside of the marching season, written by Steve in high school. So I guess all my teachers did a really good job of kind of transitioning the marching stuff into cool concert music that we enjoyed. So, I think that's important. I think what you're learning when you're doing that stuff shouldn't be a completely different sort of beast, in a lot of ways. But
so drum corps, college in Arizona, then Rutgers, and then Eastman. Like that's a culture shock going from the Southwest to the East Coast. But I'm sure exciting.
It was definitely a culture shock. So I never lived anywhere but Arizona, except when I did drum corps, I was living on a bus. But so moving to New Jersey was definitely a culture shock. I survived it, and I was able to drive there. So I definitely, it built character to kind of do that pickup and move across the country, literally. Right. But that was really cool. It was really great to be in a totally different environment and meet new friends. That's where I met Annie Stevens and a lot of really good friends from college. Definitely was cold from being in Arizona. So, I ended up living on the East Coast after that. Actually, I moved back to Texas for 3 years after I did my master's and lived and kind of worked there. So I was back in the heat, I suppose. But, then I was
You just put your winter coat in storage for a bit, I guess. But
yeah, not for long, because then I was back in Virginia a couple years later. So,
man, you have been all over. So, what was in Texas? Like just teaching, playing, gigging, stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I was after my master's degree. My best friend actually moved to Dallas to go to UT Southwestern to be a physical therapist. Tori Lopez. She actually marched Vanguard with me too. But I just kind of, it was a last minute thing, but I picked up and moved to Texas, and also my roommates were moving there. And so I got a job working at Marcus High School with Ken and Wiley, in the middle school and the high school as a private lessons instructor, because that's a thing, So I did that, taught percussion ensemble and marching band and private lessons to middle school and high school kids for 3 years, full time there, and did some playing. But
in Texas, for example, I mean, the music education there has a curriculum like a science program might have, or math or history, right? So they have certain requirements they have. From year to year,
I mean, it
stuff like that.
Very well-oiled machine, and it was really cool working with Kinnan, because he's been at that program. I mean, now it's probably been 30 years, or I'm kind of guessing on that, but it's a well-oiled machine. It's a really successful program. Yeah. And so he's got a book that I still use to teach my methods classes. So it was great to come in under him and kind of see how he runs the program and just be, part of that process. I mean, I learned as much as I've learned anywhere else by doing that, so all the middle school kids feed into the high school, and they were all really good players, just really organized, and they really valued marching band, but also percussion ensemble in the spring was a really big deal. And so that was really cool to be able to do that.
I mean, we host an annual percussion solo and ensemble competition, and a lot of groups from Texas are submitting amazing performances from their studios. It's really pretty exciting. And then, so then Eastman, you go back to the sort of east, right?
Yeah. Well, after Texas, I moved to Virginia for a couple years because I got married. That's where my husband was working. I know. It's a lot. It's been a long time. You look at the years, you're like, wow. But I started my own studio in the Newport News area. It was good being in Texas, kind of seeing how that system worked, because then I was kind of there to start a percussion ensemble and my studio of my own in Virginia. And then that's actually where I met my duo partner, or not met, but we started the duo because when I was living in Virginia, she got a job down the street at Christopher Newport University.
Oh, okay.
And so...
Right.
That's where that all began.
Yeah, Annie. So she was teaching at Virginia Tech by then, or not quite yet?
No, she was at Eastman finishing up her doctorate, and then got a job at Christopher Newport University, which is in Newport News area.
Okay.
And so she moved there. We played and had fun together, in grad school. So it was we can't be in the same city 10 minutes away from each other and not start something. So that's when we kind of dreamed up this crazy thing to do a duo and do a road trip across the country, and kind of that was our inaugural thing. And so that was 2012 when we started.
And Escape 10, and from when we've met and spoke about some of this before, you toured in her Ford Escape. Is that correct? You crammed all your instruments and selves into an Escape. And where'd the 10 come from?
So we spent most of our trip from Newport News, Virginia to LA and back on the I-10.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's where 10 comes from. And then, we fit a 5-octave marimba and a large vibraphone and a toy piano and a bunch of cowbells and luggage in the car for 3 weeks, coast to coast. So
and you're still playing together, so it didn't.
Yes.
You made it. You didn't get tired of each other and decide that it wasn't going to happen.
No. I think the good test is if you can spend 3 weeks in a car with somebody
Right.
and get along the whole time and never fight, and really neither of us slept while the other one was driving either, then I think, it's going to work. I mean, if you're going to play chamber music with people, you got to like the people that you're playing with, and we're really great friends and have a good chemistry. So that was really, really fun. So, yeah, we're still going strong. She's actually getting here this weekend because we've got some gigs next week, so...
Yeah, I was looking at your calendar. I mean, you're doing, is it the first Steve Weiss Mallet Festival? Are you involved in that, or both you and Annie?
I think I'm just doing it this summer, and I think it's the first one. Okay. Annie and I played at the Barns a few years ago, so this is the same venue, but I guess a different event that I'll be doing in August. So,
and then there's a Mallet Lab. That's like a mallet festival, right?
Yeah, it's a summer intensive in West Palm Beach. That's a big thing. There's like 40 or 50 students from across the world internationally, and really great faculty coming from everywhere. So that'll be. I did that last year, so I get to go back. They were lucky enough that they invited me back to do it this year. So
yeah, very cool. I was looking at that actually earlier this week. I think the faculty was awesome. Besides yourself, I think Cameron Leach was there, Josh Jones, Gloria Yahalevsky, and I'm drawing a blank on some of the others, but
Ivan Trevino will be there.
Yes, like very cool. Like what an awesome experience for anyone that's sitting there.
It'll be really fun.
And what's the Prairie Music Residency?
Prairie Music Residency is like a percussion and brass seminar up in Canada, right? I believe Saskatchewan. And so, they invited me to come out. I'm going to be like the percussion director and guest artist. I'll get to play some concerts and work with the delegates, I believe is what they call the students that are participating from the community. Sure. I think it's at the University of Saskatchewan. Right. So that's cool.
What are you and Annie doing then?
Annie and I, we had some stuff in May. So Russell Hartenberger wrote us a piece. We commissioned him to write a piece called Magic Time that we premiered at Virginia Tech earlier in May. Where he had Dream Cymbals made us these custom cymbals that are tuned to specific pitches, and then they're played with their pitched M-bow gongs. So they shipped us all these really cool gongs, and he wrote this piece. It's like a marimba duo, kind of soloists with 5-person ensemble that plays the gongs and the cymbals. So we premiered that at Tech in May, which is super cool, and Russell came down from Toronto and worked with us. So it was really, really great to work with the composer and kind of, realize this piece. And then we played with the honor band, a Sejourné Concerto at Tech. And then next week we are playing at the Cummer Museum here in Jacksonville, and we're premiering a piece called Illuminations by Eric Guinevin, who is on the composition faculty at James Madison University. So we got a Fromm Foundation commission to write us this marimba duo. So it's 3 movements. It's 22 minutes long. It's really hard. It's really, really cool. Right. But it's a serious, intense marimba duo. So we're premiering that piece as the focal point of our program next week at the Cummer Museum.
Right. So next week it'll be the first week of June.
June 6th. Yeah.
So your summer is booked.
Yeah.
You're not going to be home. What's Shasti going to do? Do you FaceTime?
I already... sometimes, yeah. I already haven't been home. My husband is a very patient individual, so we definitely, the pictures of the dog, get sent back and forth and I'm out of town, so.
Yeah. It's fun. So, sorry, we are kind of jumping around a bit, but that's fine. So, ultimately you end up in Florida. Was that your first college gig then?
I mean, I taught a sabbatical replacement at Oklahoma City University for a semester, prior to my point. I think that was in 2015. But then this was, my first. Like, I got the job when I was still in school, so I had a semester to finish, and then we moved right here.
So you've been in University of North Florida for just like 4 years then?
I just finished my third year.
Oh, okay. And obviously going well. I mean, your schedule's crazy. One thing I do want to talk about too is like composing. So not only obviously, we talked about some commissions that you're doing, but you do a lot of composing. Like, when did that start, I guess? And then how does it kind of fit in with some of the other activities you have going on?
It kind of started like recently. Like, I guess, I just, I don't know, I just gave myself permission. I guess when you're a student, you're always... Yeah. I guess I always came from the mindset, like, I'm not a composer. Like, I've never taken composition lessons. And I will give props to people who are, like, legit, they have a composition degree and their brains are, like, 10 times more complex and smart than somebody like me. And, like, that is, totally amazing. And I guess holding that in that high regard, I was always, like, I've always been creative, I guess, with music, but I never was like, well, I can't compose, I can't write anything. I did a lot of arranging. I wrote a lot of front ensemble books, right. I guess, and I think that's really helpful for orchestrating, and you are having to kind of come up with new material to fit with what's happening. So I definitely think that helps. But I guess when you're in college, too, you're always just looking for the next cool, important standard repertoire to play. Yeah. And, finally, I guess I still feel like a kid, but I'm getting older. And I just had this realization, like, last summer where I was, like, trying to figure out what to play and what was the next thing to do. And I was like, I've had these ideas rattling around in my head. I'm just going to write it down. Like, I'm allowed. I gave myself permission to write my own stuff and play it. And then I thought about all the other percussionists that are doing that. And... Right. I was like, well, I'm just going to try it out and see how it goes. And so I kind of, I took like a 2-week walkabout. I just like totally unplugged social media, email, and everything, and kind of just dove in and like wrote 3 pieces. So well, that's what I've kind of been trying out. So,
well, I think it's cool, and what the best point you made was giving yourself permission. I mean, I think you're totally right. When you're, I won't say younger, because people can go to school at any age, but like when you are in school, you kind of have different priorities or different focus, or, maybe like I did study some composition in undergrad. So maybe you have some of that experience, but kind of when you get older or get established a little bit more and you feel more comfortable, like totally giving yourself permission, allowing yourself to like try something different or have another creative outlet. So I think that's a really important point. I mean, I won't tell you how old I am either, but like I'm definitely at a point where it's like, oh, I should have, I wish I, would have done more recording or, kind of learned engineering or mixing or whatever. And Jamel, who works here, is like, well, it's not too late, It's not, so, that's something that, I kind of want to pursue is, give myself permission and get permission from my wife to buy a bunch of mics and software and everything, everything I need. No, I think it's a great point. So you just had a piece released by Tap Space, if I'm saying this right, Omnis Trio. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that... obviously that's a trio. You and Annie have a duo. You've composed some stuff for the 2 of you. What are some of those other pieces?
Well, let's see. I think most of the stuff that I've written that Annie and I have played is like arrangements. Like we have like a My Favorite Things arrangement and then a Radiohead arrangement. I wrote Faded Lines, which is snare drum duo. That's also a Tap Space tune that we've played together. And then I've recently written some solo stuff. And then Omnis Trio, I wrote that like in 2017 when we had programmed Trio per Uno and then some things transpired, and we kind of made a last-minute call to change the programming. So I pumped that piece out over a weekend. And bless my students' hearts, they learned it in a very short amount of time and did a really great job. And so it's a cool, fun piece. It's like for bass drum, and then each person has bongos and some opera gongs. And there's more melodic content in the opera gongs, I think, that I added that I thought was cool. Because the dream opera gongs, the pitch bending gongs are cool.
Sure.
So we played that, and then finally, just getting it published through Top Space. So
yeah, and I was kind of checking out one piece, Kibo, solo snare drum and mallet quartet, and this kind of leads into another question I had just about influence. I mean, obviously with the kind of some Bob Becker influence with, is it Mudra?
Yeah.
I think is like a similar idea. I mean, is that kind of what, like things that you're interested in, or some influences, and that kind of, obviously, I mean, everybody's influenced by other artists, other compositions, other types of whatever. I mean, obviously that was a pretty heavy influence. Is there kind of other things that you pull from, other ideas, or it's just kind of like you wake up one day or I guess you mentioned you had some themes or some melodies running through your head at some point and you got them out?
It's kind of, it's definitely both. I do think you sound like what you listen to a certain extent. And I guess, music that I really, really enjoy of all different types greatly impacts me. Even if I hear something and I really like the timbre of that, I like the harmony of that, I like the rhythm of that. I kind of file stuff away that I really react to, I guess, and that's something that impacts me. Kibo definitely was my first composition ever. That's my baby. Cool. And I sat on that for a long time. And so actually in grad school, Bob Becker taught a sabbatical. She went on a sabbatical replacement, so he was there for a semester, and he was working on his rudimental arithmetic book, snare drumming. So we were doing a lot of snare drumming and different kind of sticking permutations and rhythmic subdivisions that were kind of crazy. And so he had me write a solo. And I was it was super scary because I had never written anything, let alone a snare drum piece, Yeah. And so that was the first version of Kibo, was just her solo snare drum based on a lot of his rudimental rhythmic stuff that we were working on. And that was in 2005. Then I sat on that piece for 10 years. Right. And in 2015, by that time, I had been studying some Joe Tompkins solos and done more Pratt. My snare drumming background is kind of backwards. I started with violin and then a lot of marimba, and then I really came to like snare drum later. And it's usually for percussionists, it's opposite. You start on snare drum and then you kind of do the mallet thing. So I kind of beefed it up and added a bunch of stuff to it. And then I thought, actually, so that's where the rhythmic language comes from. But then the original, Kibo comes from the song Africa by Toto. I really like that song, and I like the rhythms in that song. And so when Bob said, you need to write a piece, I was like, well, I can't just pull this from thin air. So I thought, what's a song that I really like the rhythm to and the groove to? So that kind of is where those rhythmic cells come from. So then when I added the ensemble stuff later so I could play it with students, it's not like a cover of Africa, but the harmonies I really like. It's rich harmonies. It's not just a 1-5-1 thing. There's some nice changes in that tune. So that's where that came from. And then, I think, stuff that I'm really inspired by nature, I guess. Yeah. I go to the beach and I love it. And it just gives me ideas for timbres and sounds, and I really like rhythm. So there's several pop songs that I'll hear that have kind of complex, interesting rhythmic stuff that, I'll remember that rhythm, and I'm I really, really like that. And that has been the motive for a lot of stuff that I've written, and Radiohead's kind of like that. I love Radiohead's harmonies and their rhythm and how they kind of trick you metrically. I love that stuff, man. So, I filed it away. And then I have woken up in the middle of the night and just woken up and had an idea in my head that I had to get up and write down.
Yeah.
But I don't know where that came from.
Get out your voice recorder and...
Yeah, oh man, it's so full. My voice memos are so full of stuff.
So it's definitely something you keep moving forward with. Like, I mean, and how you fit it in, I don't know. I mean, how does that kind of work? Like, as far as, teaching collegiate stuff, and then obviously you're doing solo appearances, and then Escape 10 is obviously super active, like just one day at a time, I guess. But do you kind of have to map out time for when, like, okay, I have 3 days, I'm going to give Shasti some belly rubs, and then I'm going to work on this piece that, like, I've been pondering for the last 10 years?
Yeah. It's getting to the point where I definitely have to carefully schedule my time, because my schedule gets a little bit crazy. You think the summers are kind of nice. Like, I don't teach summer classes. This summer I'm traveling a whole bunch, but I try to be careful about carving out some time where I'm not traveling, because that's, I feel like, when I have stillness, I can focus and get deep work done, and that's usually when I can pump stuff out that I'm really happy with, when I just have time to kind of focus and not do other things. So, and I'll get ideas like during the busyness of the school year, and I just try to file that away. And then usually the summertime is when it all kind of explodes out of my brain. But, yeah.
Cool. Well, we have, I always like to ask some kind of questions, more topic-oriented stuff. Some of it we've already touched on, as far as, like, what kind of inspires you, as far as, composition sense. We kind of talked about that. The thing I like to ask people is about success, I guess, and it's a little bit of a strange question because, but it's how. I mean, obviously you've have a lot of different directions in your career, and keeps moving forward. Your career keeps kind of propelling forward. And how do you kind of stay grounded and make some sense of what, success might be throughout that? Or maybe it's just, again, kind of a day-to-day thing. Or you don't.
How do I, is the question, like, how do I stay grounded?
How do you measure success, basically? Because sometimes I think it can get overwhelming for people, like, oh, I have to get this done to feel like I've accomplished something, or I have to kind of hit this mark that I've made up in my head. Like, I mean, everybody has goals, and I don't know, how do you kind of measure the success that you've come to realize?
Well, Tim, the way you measure success is how many likes and views you have on social media. I'm just kidding.
That's what I was leading you to. Exactly. Thank you.
That's really the measure of self-worth right there. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. No. I'm totally kidding. Being facetious. It's terrible. I think I'm one that gets really... I can kind of get overwhelmed in the minutia and the little details, I suppose. I like to make lists, and I like to add stuff to the list so I can cross it off, and then it's kind of like, I'll never get it done. Yeah, and then you just feel like you're not, getting anything accomplished. But I think big picture, I mean, I guess if you're satisfied with what you're doing, and you're confident that what you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, and that's really your calling, and that you love it, then it's just keeping that in mind, I guess. I mean, I love what I do. I love that I get to perform. I love working with people, and I, love working with students, and I think it's a very special thing that I'm very blessed to be able to do. And so try to keeping that in mind, and just always doing the right thing and keeping the best of intentions, and then also just trying to always be better, I guess, and not getting complacent. So if you're measuring success, I always think, like, I guess, what, can I do something this year that I wasn't able to do last year?
Right.
Yeah.
No, totally. And I think that's it. And I guess what I'm trying to get at, it's not the number of likes that you got on Facebook. All those are awesome. Instagram too. Just shout out if you follow Black Swan Percussion on Instagram. Kidding. Or like the latest award that you got or whatever, some sort of peer recognition. I mean, all that stuff is awesome. But like at the end of the day, yeah, if you're not happy or if you're not sort of satisfied with what you're doing, then why do it?
Yeah.
Find something that you are satisfied doing and are interested in moving forward with. So
right. And I think, like being a college professor and working in academia, there's kind of two sides to it, especially being a music professor, because there's the academia portion where you're measured by what's on paper and you're striving to get publications and get performances, and even the social media aspect is part of that, like show that you're doing things. And I think that's a way for the system to recognize success. Sure. But the real part of that is if you're teaching and, you're really committed to that. I mean, it's the interaction with the students and working with people who choose to do this for a living and building relationships and connections. I think that's what makes you full and keeps you moving forward, and at least what motivates me to keep getting better and keep, just keeping on with what we do. And I think you have to kind of, keep that in perspective. And also just being older, I think, especially after going back to school and getting my doctorate after being out of school for a while, I went back with a fire to like learn all the things that I didn't learn before, I guess, and not take anything for granted. And so you start to realize, I think it's really cool when you can recognize being able to synthesize information and apply that to different stuff when you're teaching or playing or whatever. And it's kind of like, all right, like when you get old enough to look back and be like, that did matter that I did that or that I learned that, or, and you just get a maturity about it, which is kind of cool. But
no, I think that's a really great point. Actually, when I was in school and studying some composition, my composition professor, he was like a trombone player, but we talked about that stuff a lot, like what sort of absorbing information, stuff that you're learning, you don't realize you're learning it, and then it kind of manifests itself in new and different ways. Like, because sometimes I would get down, I'd be like, I don't know, like, is this really right what I'm doing, or where am I going to go to grad school and stuff like that? Am I on the right track? And so we talked a lot about that stuff, and I think it kind of relates to what the success that you might be feeling at different points in your journey, I guess. You talked about having sort of that fire when you went back to school. I mean, where do you find that now? Where do you find that kind of motivation? You're an enthusiastic person. I've seen it live, which is super cool. Like, so how do you kind of keep that going? If you have to?
Well, I mean, I'm a musician for a living, and that is like in my blood. It's in my soul. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do when I was young, I guess. So that's kind of built in. So I don't, even on my worst days, I still know that this is what I should be doing and that I want to be doing, that I'm lucky enough to be doing. So, I mean, that's kind of programmed in me. But I think, like, now I think there's two parts that really fire me up. And one is, like, performing. I really like playing music. I like practicing. I like that whole element in all its facets, chamber music and solo stuff. And, that is just kind of it. I'm wired in a way where I can do that for 4 hours and not do anything else, and that's always the way it's been. And then performing, performance and playing concerts, like that's a feeling that you can't really replicate. But then the second half of that, the other second part of what really fires me up is teaching. And I think, like, when you have a really good teaching moment or a really good lesson, or you make a breakthrough with a student, or, can sort of enjoy and appreciate your students' successes and stuff, or when they figure stuff out. I think that definitely fires me up in an equal but very different way. And there's two distinct things that I think are balanced, that I find a balance with, I guess. Because I'll be really pumped, but it's different feeling. And luckily, with what I do, I get to have both of those things. And so that nice balance, I think, keeps me, going, I guess, because I like teaching and I like working with people, and it's all music too. So, yeah.
No, I could totally see from an education standpoint when dots are connected, and your students, or they finally have a breakthrough or like some exciting moment, measure of success in their mind at that time, like could totally be motivation for an educator. We talked a little bit, earlier, how you got started, playing violin, transitioning to, Pitt in marching band. Was there a moment at that time, anywhere in there, that was like kind of this spark or trigger that told you wanted to do this for the rest of your life, or was it just a kind of a natural, kind of organic transition?
I don't think I ever saw myself doing anything else. So, in high school, I tried to, I just always did music. Like, my parents made me do the basketball team at the YMCA. It was like a boys and girls team. I was terrible at that. That was awful. It was just awful. Right. I used to write.
I sympathize. I was the kid in 7th grade that went to try out for the basketball team and forgot, like, gym clothes. So I was wearing, like, my slacks and sweater and stuff. Yeah, that was me. I didn't get past the first step though. So sports were not my thing. So I can totally relate.
Oh man. I think like I did like different stuff. Like I'm kind of artistic, so I really liked art growing up. I rode horses a lot.
Okay.
And so there was a time in my life where I wanted to be a jockey, because I'm a small person, and you get to ride horses fast. But that was, I guess, very fleeting, because once I think got connected into music, and especially when I got into high school and had those really great teachers that I mentioned, like where they were getting degrees, and it was like a realistic thing, like you can keep doing this for a living, and that they encouraged me to do that. And my parents have always been really supportive. So I didn't know exactly where that would take me, but I knew that is all I wanted to do all the time. By the time I got done, because I started teaching right out of high school, like marching band and stuff. So I guess by the time I was done with my master's degree, I knew that I wanted to probably get my doctorate and teach college in that capacity. So.
No, that's great. You mentioned Radiohead, which is definitely not a guilty musical pleasure, but do you have any? Do you have any others?
You mean like bands or types of music I like?
Well, anything if like, you're home by yourself and you want to put something on, and if anybody else walked in the room, including your husband, you might feel guilty or embarrassed.
Huh.
It's okay to say no. What is going? Is Shasti like?
That is my bulldog. She's panting in the background. Go on. Sorry. She came in to visit. She's under the room right now. Well, let's see. I listen to all kinds of stuff, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. I'll listen to country music. I have no problem with that. It actually makes me kind of happy and at ease, because it reminds me of my mom.
Really?
It's like, I just imagine people like in a barn at like a barbecue drinking beer in the sun, and it's like chill and not complicated.
Well, country music is interesting because it's like the happiest, most depressing music. Like, I don't know. I would consider that a guilty musical pleasure, but I know probably millions of people around the world don't. So,
I don't listen to it at home, but I will put it on in the car. But I really like Lady Gaga. You know, I like bluegrass music. You know, I have a banjo, so like I'll play that at home, you know, and just noodle around with that kind of stuff. I have a weakness for wind chimes and Almglocken, so if I were to indulge, you know, I may or may not have 3 humongous Almglocken from John Singer and also like a chromatic set of regular sized ones and like 20 sets of wind chimes. So
and everything you're doing out there, I think it's great. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. And I really love your stuff. You guys have, you know, I think my quote is you have very luscious instruments that are high quality and beautiful. So I dig Black
luscious
Swamp.
was the first adjective I've ever heard luscious from you. So
I like luscious things. No, I like luscious bulldogs and luscious marimbas with wide bars and luscious Black Swamp percussion gear. So
cool. Well, thanks, Andrea.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Talk soon.
Okay.
This has been a BSP production.
Bye-bye.
Recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio assistance by Nathan Coles. And music by Adam Hopper.